Who mistakes a girl in a cleaning uniform for the most anticipated guest of a millionaire's private gala? Elena Morales came just to collect trash after the event, tired, unnoticed, invisible as always. But when a broken light and a borrowed mask placed her in the wrong room at the wrong time, she suddenly found herself swept into the spotlight. The man she met that night didn't ask who she was. He only asked her to dance. And what happened after would change both of their lives forever. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. The ballroom was almost empty, echoing with the last notes of a string quartet packing up their instruments. Discarded champagne glasses glimmered like forgotten promises under chandeliers, and petals from trampled centerpieces stuck to the polished floor. Elena Morales tightened the grip on her trash cart, the squeaky wheel turning louder now that the music had stopped. She wasn't supposed to be seen. That was the unspoken rule of her job. Clean fast, be quiet, be invisible. Her faded uniform bore the Crestline logo, a private cleaning service contracted by the estate for their events. And tonight's event, according to the chatter she caught over her earpiece, had been the most exclusive masquerade gala in the city, hosted by none other than Alexander Carlisle, reclusive tech millionaire and owner of the sprawling Carlisle estate. Not that she cared about millionaires. Not tonight. Her back ached, her feet throbbed, and her sister Sophia still hadn't replied to her last 3 texts. Elena bent down to scoop up a trail of cocktail napkins when the heel of her borrowed work shoe snapped off. She lost her balance and grabbed a table's edge to keep from falling, cursing softly under her breath. So much for staying invisible. The staff entrance was down a narrow corridor, but a yellow maintenance sign now blocked the hall. A pipe had burst again. She groaned. The only way back to the service area was through the main ballroom and then up the central stairs, right past the few remaining guests and maybe even Carlisle himself. Fantastic, she muttered. Her radio crackled. Morales, skip the lounge and start on the south wing, her supervisor barked. VIPs are still in the East Parlor. Don't go in there. I repeat, stay out of the East Parlor. Elena glanced up the wide marble staircase. The East Parlor was behind a set of double doors marked by an ornate bronze crest. It would have been easy to avoid if the lights hadn't gone out in the main corridor. She paused. Couldn't see. Couldn't finish her route. A faint voice behind the door caught her attention. She should have arrived by now. She confirmed this morning. Maybe she changed her mind. The muse never changes her mind. Elena froze, hands still resting on the doorknob. Muse? Before she could turn away, a low, polished voice spoke again, calm, steady, with a confidence that slid under her skin. If she's coming, she'll come through here. Something stirred in her chest. A recklessness she hadn't felt in years. She had 20 minutes before she was expected in the south wing. Just enough time to take the long way around and less. Her gaze dropped to the nearby coat rack where a black velvet mask with silver trim hung loosely from one of the hooks. Probably forgotten by a guest or staff member. She didn't know what she was thinking, maybe she wasn't, but her fingers reached out, brushing the mask as though it might vanish if she blinked. 1 minute later, she opened the East Parlor doors. A hush fell over the room. Soft jazz played from a vintage phonograph in the corner. The lighting was low, golden, casting warm halos across the velvet armchairs and crystal decanters. 7 or 8 guests lingered by the bar, each more polished and glittering than the last. But it was the man by the fireplace who turned first. He was tall, dark-haired, dressed in a tailored tuxedo with no tie, his collar open just enough to suggest that even rules bent around him. He held a glass in one hand, but he wasn't drinking. He was watching, waiting. His eyes landed on her, the cleaning girl in a uniform beneath a forgotten mask, and something in his expression shifted. Recognition? Hope? Elena? He heard someone say behind her. No, it was just in her own mind. Like an echo of who she used to be before bills and bleach and everything she'd stopped dreaming about. He stepped forward. Right on time. he said, voice soft and rich. She didn't correct him. Didn't say she wasn't the muse they were waiting for. Didn't say she was just the girl who emptied their bins and scrubbed their floors. Instead, she nodded, once, and stepped into the room like she belonged. A woman offered her a glass of champagne. Elena took it with a shaking hand. No one questioned her presence. The mask helped. So did the dim lighting and her quiet confidence, which surprised even her. "You don't like crowds," he said beside her. She startled. He smiled slightly. "Sorry. I watched you standing near the door. You looked like you were trying to memorize your exit." Elena tilted her head. "And what does that tell you?" "That you're smart," he said. "And that maybe you don't belong here either." She blinked. "You don't think you belong?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he extended his hand. "I'm Alexander," he said. "May I have this dance?" 1,000 thoughts collided in her mind. The uniform under the mask. The trash cart waiting in the dark. The fact that if anyone found out, she'd be fired in an instant. But no one moved to stop her. So she placed her hand in his and danced. The band had returned, or maybe they'd never left, and music filled the air like mist. Alexander didn't try to lead too much. He just moved with her, slow and graceful, like he knew this night wasn't meant to last forever and wanted to stretch it for as long as he could. He didn't ask questions. Not the ones she feared, at least. Just smiled every time she looked up. And when she stepped a little too close, he didn't step back. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Elena," she whispered. He nodded. "Beautiful." She didn't ask if he meant the name, or the moment, or the way her voice trembled when she said it. Because in that instant, she felt beautiful. Not clean. Not invisible. Real. And then, someone called his name. "Mr. Carlyle, press is ready downstairs." Alexander looked toward the door, hesitation flickering in his eyes. Then he turned back to her. "I have to go," he said. "But stay. Please." She gave him the only answer she could. A quiet smile. A step backward. He paused like he wanted to say more, but left, and the moment broke. She stood in the middle of the room, dizzy with what just happened. As voices returned, drinks refilled, and the fantasy began to dissolve like glitter in water. But before she could slip away, someone touched her arm. "Elena Morales?" a voice asked. She spun around. One of the catering leads. Eyes narrowed. "You're not supposed to be in here." And just like that, she remembered who she was again. She didn't run. She just nodded, placed the glass down, and walked back through the door. Back to the uniform. Back to the cart. Back to reality. But something in her had changed, and she wasn't sure it would ever go back. If you're still here, you're amazing. Hit like if you love true stories, it helps us keep going. The night air outside the estate bit colder than it had any right to be in early spring. Elena pulled her worn jacket tighter as she pushed the cleaning cart across the flagstone path, the wheels rattling louder than she wanted. The mask was tucked deep into her pocket now, just in case. Not because she meant to steal it. She didn't. She just couldn't leave it behind. By the time she reached the service lot, the other cleaning vans were already pulling away. Her supervisor barely spared her a glance, mumbling about timesheets and floor plans for tomorrow. Elena signed out, waved goodnight, and began the long walk to the bus stop. No one offered her a ride. No one ever did. Half an hour later, she sat on the back seat of the half-empty city bus, her body sagging into the worn vinyl as the rhythm of the route lulled Theo, her little brother, to sleep against her shoulder. Sophia, their older sister, was working the night shift again at the hospital, and Elena had promised she'd look after him. Not that she minded. Theo was the only person who ever looked at her like she mattered. He stirred as the bus jolted over a pothole. "Did you get it?" he mumbled. Elena glanced down at the crumpled flyer in her bag, a contest for free art classes Theo had begged her to enter him in. They needed a sketch sample and a parent's signature. She nodded, brushing his hair back gently. "We'll finish it tomorrow, okay? I promise." The bus shuddered to a stop 2 blocks from their building. Elena carried Theo all the way up the stairs when he fell asleep again, his arms looped around her neck like always. Their apartment was small, dimly lit, and filled with hand-me-down furniture and shelves made from milk crates. She laid him gently on the pull-out sofa, covered him with the blue blanket he never slept without, and finally exhaled. Only then did she let her hand drift to her coat pocket. The mask was still there. Black velvet, silver trim, warm from her touch. She stared at it like it might start talking. Like it might remind her of the way Alexander's voice had softened when he said her name. The way he looked at her like he wanted to see past everything she wasn't. But it was just a mask. And she was just the girl who cleaned up after people like him. Still, she tucked it into the drawer beside her bed before switching off the light. The next morning came too early. So did the knock on the door. Elena nearly tripped over the coffee table trying to reach it before Theo woke up. She opened the door expecting a landlord, a neighbor, maybe a mistake. What she didn't expect was a woman in a black pantsuit holding a clipboard and a tablet. "Elena Morales?" "Yes. My name's Clara. I'm with Carlisle Properties. Mr. Carlisle asked me to extend this." She handed over a slim, black envelope with a gold seal. Elena didn't take it. "This is a mistake," she said quickly. I didn't." Clara smiled tightly. He insisted. With that, the woman turned and left, heels clicking down the hallway. Elena closed the door with shaking hands. She held the envelope like it might burn her fingers, then peeled it open slowly. Inside was a single card engraved with thick, elegant lettering. "Dinner. Tonight. Carlisle Estate. No mask required." A phone number was printed at the bottom along with a note. "For any arrangements you need. Everything's covered." She sank onto the couch beside Theo, who blinked sleepily at her. "What's that?" he asked. "An invitation," she whispered. "Like to a birthday?" Elena laughed under her breath. "Sort of." She stared at the card a long time before she texted Sophia at the hospital. "Can you watch Theo tonight?" Her fingers hovered. "It's weird. I'll explain later." When Sophia texted back a simple "sure," Elena finally let herself breathe. Still, the hours passed in a blur of doubt. She changed into her cleanest clothes, black jeans and a blouse that didn't have bleach stains, and put her hair up in a neat braid. No makeup. She didn't own any. Just lip balm and a nervous heart. At 6:30, a car pulled up in front of their building. Not a limo. Just a black sedan. Professional. Quiet. The driver nodded as she approached. "Ms. Morales?" She slid into the back seat, clutching her bag like a lifeline. The Carlisle estate looked different in daylight. Less like a palace, more like something from a magazine. Clean lines, old trees, everything balanced like it had been built to impress people who didn't need impressing. A butler opened the door before she even knocked. "Right this way." He didn't ask her name. Didn't look twice at her jeans. He led her past the same hall she had once entered by accident, through the ballroom where she had danced with the man who didn't know who she was, and into a smaller dining room lit by a chandelier the size of her entire apartment. Alexander was already there, leaning against the far wall with his sleeves rolled up and no tie again. He looked at her like she hadn't left his mind since she walked away. "Elena," he said simply. She didn't speak. Didn't move. He crossed the room slowly. "I know who you are now." She swallowed. And I invited you anyway. You thought I was someone else. I hoped you were someone different," he said. "And you were." Elena looked away. I'm a cleaner, not a guest. You were more honest in 5 minutes than half the people I've met in 5 years. She didn't know what to say to that. He gestured to the table. Dinner. She nodded stiffly and took the far chair. He poured her a glass of sparkling water without asking. She watched him, the casual precision, the way he didn't fill his own glass. Like he was waiting. Why? She asked finally. He didn't pretend not to understand. Because you told me the truth without trying to impress me. Because you saw the room and didn't run. Because the moment I saw you, something in me went quiet. Elena blinked hard. You don't know me. I'd like to. The room went still. She looked at her hands. What if I don't want to be your project? He leaned forward. Then we eat. We talk. And you leave whenever you want. No strings. No headlines. She met his eyes. And if I stay? He held her gaze. Then I stop pretending I don't want you to. The candles flickered. And Elena, the girl who only came to pick up trash, stayed seated and listened. Dinner stretched on longer than Elena expected, not because of the food, which was warm, careful, not overly rich, but because of the conversation. Alexander didn't ask invasive questions. He asked what she liked, what she wanted as a kid, why she paused before every answer like she was afraid of saying something wrong. No one had ever noticed that before. At one point he leaned back and smiled. You remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who wanted to change the world with architecture and nothing else. Elena's stomach tightened. I studied for that once. I know, he said gently. You got into Carleton. With a merit scholarship. Her eyes widened. I asked around. One of my staff knew someone at the old admissions board. You looked into me? Her voice was sharp now, the protective wall rising again. He didn't back down. I didn't want to guess anymore. I wanted to know who you were. Not just who you pretended to be for one night. She looked away. It wasn't pretending, she said finally. I wasn't trying to lie. I was just tired of being unseen. His voice was quiet. I know the feeling. The silence between them was no longer heavy, just honest. When she stood to leave, he didn't stop her. He just walked her to the front door and handed her a small white envelope. What's this? She asked. An invitation. There's an open position at the foundation I run, community redevelopment, local projects, city beautification. They need someone who sees what others overlook. I don't have credentials. You have instinct. I'm not sure I can say yes. Then think about it. She took the envelope but didn't open it. Why are you doing this? Alexander studied her for a long moment. Because you matter. Because the version of you that picked up a broken mask and walked into a room full of strangers. She's brave. And I want to see what she'll do next. Elena walked home that night without calling a ride. The city felt different under her feet. Still gray. Still cracked. But not cold. At the apartment, Theo was already asleep. Sophia sat at the table, flipping through a nursing textbook and sipping instant coffee. How was it? She asked, not looking up. Elena set down the unopened envelope. Strange. You like him. I don't know him. But he knows about you. Elena nodded slowly. Sophia closed the book. You going to see him again? She didn't answer. But the next morning, she opened the envelope. Inside was more than a job listing. It was a personal note in Alexander's handwriting. You don't owe anyone an explanation for surviving. But if you ever want to build something again, I'll make sure you have the tools. The foundation office was nothing like the estate. It was smaller, tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner downtown. The waiting room had paper cups and noisy radiators. Elena stood outside for 10 minutes before she worked up the courage to go in. The woman at the desk recognized her. "Ms. Morales? We've been expecting you." She was shown to a corner office, not hers, but someone's. Inside were blueprints for a community park redesign, notes on local murals, proposals for urban greenhouses. And standing behind the desk was a tall woman with gray-streaked curls and reading glasses. "I'm Cora," she said. "Alex mentioned you. Said you have an eye for flow and human-centered design. Let's see if he's right." Elena didn't sit. "Not yet. I've never led a project before," she said. "I've never even finished school." Cora smiled. "Good. You're not trained to color inside the lines." By the end of the week, she was sketching. By the end of the month, she was helping redesign a pocket park in her own neighborhood. And Alexander? He didn't hover. He didn't send gifts or leave flowers. But once a week, she found a cup of coffee on the edge of her desk, just the way she liked it, and no one ever saw who left it. One Friday, she walked out of the office and found him sitting on the steps, sleeves rolled again, sunglasses tucked into the collar of his shirt. "Waiting for someone?" she asked. He looked up, grinned. "Depends. Did she come out yet?" She sat beside him, hands clasped. "Why are you here, Alex?" "Because I'm tired of hosting parties where I don't know anyone," he said. "And I thought maybe this time I could meet someone for real." "You already did." His smile softened. "I want to know what happened to the girl in the mask." "She became someone who stopped hiding." "That's what I was hoping." Elena looked down at her scuffed shoes. "People still talk, you know. Some of the old cleaning staff think I snuck my way in." "I've heard it." And it still hurts." He reached into his pocket, pulled out something small, a pin shaped like a phoenix, old and tarnished. "This belonged to my mother. She was a painter. Said people would always look at her like she didn't belong. But that didn't stop her from creating." Elena turned the pin over in her palm. "Was she the reason for the gala?" He nodded. "She died last year. That night was supposed to honor her. The mystery guest was someone from the museum she supported. They never showed. So I really did walk into someone else's place." "No," he said gently. "You walked into yours." The pocket park was nearly finished. It was just a sliver of green in a forgotten corner of the city, but it had trees now and benches with curved edges and walking paths that didn't cut anyone off mid-step. Elena stood near the fountain as a group of kids ran past, chalk dust on their fingers, laughter echoing across the square. She smiled to herself, not because she was proud, but because this time she'd stayed long enough to finish something. Alexander arrived just before dusk. He didn't text first, he never did, but she always knew when he was coming. Maybe it was the shift in air, or the way her shoulders stopped holding tension they didn't even know they carried. He handed her a folded flyer. "We're hosting a new event," he said. "Small one. Just local partners. I'd like you to come." She looked down at the print. "Carlyle Foundation, honoring community design." "I'm not a designer," she said softly. "You are," he said. "You just don't need the title to prove it." They didn't talk about the gala. Not directly. But sometimes she'd catch him staring at her like he still saw her in the mask, and not because he missed the illusion, but because he loved what was behind it. "Are you still afraid people will find out who I was?" she asked one night as they walked through a quiet garden behind the foundation office. "No," he said. "I'm afraid they won't see who you are now." She stopped walking. "They'll talk. Let them. And if they say you fell for someone below your league?" He looked at her with that same calm from the first night. "Then they clearly don't understand leagues." Elena wasn't used to people standing still for her. Not in this way. Not without rushing, reaching, trying to fix her or change her or admire her from a distance while keeping their hands clean. Alexander didn't admire her from afar. He showed up. When Theo got sick, he sat with him through the night, watching cartoons with subtitles and fetching tissues without asking. When Sophia passed her nursing exams, he sent her a bouquet so ridiculous it barely fit through the apartment door. When Elena won her first independent design bid, a tiny cafe terrace redo, he stood in the back of the city meeting room, silent, just nodding when she looked for him. They weren't perfect. She still left her shoes in the hallway. He still forgot appointments and skipped breakfast. They argued once over a community funding delay. She accused him of caving to pressure. He accused her of assuming the worst. But they both apologized and kept going. The night of the foundation event, Elena wore a dress she'd found secondhand and altered herself. Navy blue, soft at the edges, fitted at the waist. She wore no jewelry, no perfume, just a tiny silver pin on her collar, the phoenix he'd given her. When she stepped into the ballroom, the lights weren't blinding this time. She wasn't here by mistake. The guests applauded as the local projects were shown one by one: murals, gardens, free clinics, new ramps for schools that had been neglected for decades. And then came the pocket park. Her name was listed on the screen. Elena Morales. No title. Just the work. When the clapping ended, she stepped off the stage and nearly collided with Alexander near the corner. "You did it," he said quietly. She smiled. "No mask this time." "No need." She hesitated, then asked something she hadn't before. "Do you ever wish you hadn't opened that door that night?" He blinked. "What?" "I mean, what if I'd never walked in? What if you'd seen me with the cart, not the mask?" "I would have asked you for your name either way," he said. She laughed. "You think so?" He leaned closer. "I don't just think so. I know." And then, like some invisible line between past and present finally snapped, he reached for her hand again. Not as a guest, not as a mystery, but as herself. And when she didn't pull away, when her fingers closed around his, warm and real and steady, she knew something she hadn't dared admit before. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The wind shifted early that morning, scattering petals across the park Elena once designed on paper napkins and late nights. Theo ran ahead of her, now 8 and taller than ever, his backpack bouncing as he climbed the stone ledge and pretended it was a spaceship. Alexander followed behind them, coffee in one hand, a folded city report in the other. "You're going to trip," he called to Theo. "No, I'm not," Theo yelled, then tripped. They both laughed, and Alexander jogged over to help him up, brushing leaves from his jacket like a seasoned pro. Theo didn't flinch. Not anymore. He'd stopped calling him Mr. Carlyle long ago. They walked home together, passing the old bus stop Elena used to wait at in the cold. The one where she had once carried a mask in her pocket and wondered if she'd ever belong anywhere outside the cleaning staff list. That afternoon, her phone buzzed with a message from the City Development Board. Proposal approved. Lead designer Elena Morales. She sat down on the bench in front of the building and let herself cry, not the broken kind, but the kind that pours out when everything you carried alone finally finds room to breathe. Alexander found her there an hour later. Said nothing. Just handed her a bag with her favorite pastry from the corner cafe and sat beside her. "You knew," she said. "I hoped. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because it's better when you say it first." They watched the traffic together, his shoulder brushing hers. "I was nobody," she said softly. He looked at her. "You were never nobody." Elena laughed once, wiped her eyes, and leaned against him. They never did get married in a cathedral or a palace. They didn't need to. Their wedding happened on the rooftop of the community center she helped redesign. String lights, folding chairs, and the same band from that masquerade gala hired quietly by Alexander as a surprise. She wore a simple white dress and sneakers. He wore no tie, just the same calm eyes that once saw her in a mask and wanted to know more. When they danced this time, no one mistook her for anyone else. They knew exactly who she was. After the ceremony, Theo gave a short speech, nervous, proud, way too serious for a 10-year-old. He held a piece of paper that shook in his hands as he said, "My sister used to come home with trash on her clothes and magic in her eyes. Now she helps people build things. I think that's cool." And I'm glad we found someone who dances with her." The guests laughed. Alexander almost cried. Elena stood in the middle of it all and finally allowed herself to believe what everyone else had known for a while now. She had made it, not by pretending, not by hiding, but by walking straight into the one room no one thought she belonged in, and changing everything. And years from now, when people asked how it all started, she'd smile and say, "I was just there to clean."